Palate to Palate with Robert St. John and Wyatt Waters is made possible by a generous contribution from Sanderson Farms. Additional funding is provided by this and other public television stations and from viewers like you. Thank you.
I guess they're wasps around here, but they're also bees.
Well, they're wasps.
We got like bees, you know, I've had bees at home form a hive in a wood house or whatever. I don't know how that's happening in
I don't
stone.
know. There's a little crack there, and it's big enough for a bee, so I guess the bees found it. And I don't know how many are in there, but we saw a lot of them.
It's hundreds of bees is what it is. It's a lot of bees.
And this afternoon, I got my mirror out, which I paint with, you know, my mirror that I used to paint, started flashing them like, you know, like somebody might flash a survival, you know, of an airplane. And because the bees are supposed to be affected by the sun. They're supposed to use that to find their directions. I thought, well, maybe that'll, you know, scare them off.
He's gone from a 4-year-old burning fire ants on the pavement to
I'm just trying to blind a few bees here.
Getting bees in the stone wall.
It was a slow moment.
I would like to point out that the bees are still here.
Not through.
If you want two Americans who love Italy, we're your guys.
You know, I really fell in love with Italy before I even went there, just through the paintings I studied.
Neither one of us are Italian experts. We mangle the language almost in every sentence.
But we love this place. Turning people on to the food, to the culture, to the art, and just the entire experience.
It's a great place.
We're still learning about Italy.
It's great to watch people experience this.
We went over there and we fell in love with it.
And we love sharing it with other people.
So the area we stay in, Villa Il Santo, the villa we stay in, is actually a 1,000-year-old tower that used to be on the edge of this city called Semifonte, which was a fairly large city in between Florence and Siena, almost as big as Florence, and on the trade route. So it's a very important city. They were growing, I think, in about 1,200 and had enough cities, but Florence was the big dog in that area.
And Florence told them to submit to their power, and Semifonte said something like, there was a big sign, and it said something like, "Get out of the way, watch us grow." And
Semifonte started getting so big, they started kind of feeling their oats. So they put a sign out on the walls that said, "Hey, we're here to stay, we're growing." Florence felt a little threatened by that, and they sent a couple of guys down to kind of quell the uprising there, and Semifonte folks
completely kill the campaign. Completely kill the campaign.
And the envoys. They killed the 2 ambassadors that came down. And so Florence didn't take too kindly of that. And they came down and camped out right outside the city walls. I think the locals there in this village of Semifonte put up a good fight and stayed with their wells within that area. And so they had enough to kind of keep going. And I think it was months or years that they held off the Florentines, but eventually lost the battle. And Florence wiped out. I mean, there's relatively nothing left of this village. They salted the fields and said nothing will be here for 500 years.
You got to really hate somebody to salt their fields.
Yeah, it's bad. But now, you know, this is, 1,000 years later, and they've got great olives and grapes, and there's a lot of history in that area. There's a civil war. Civil War. I was going to say, yeah. Sherman burned the out of those fields over there in Florence. World War II, there's some, bullets and stuff in the walls from World War II when German tanks were coming through that area. There's a lot of history there, and we enlist the help of our friend Marina, and we go on a nice, it was just beautiful morning walk.
In 1176, they started to build a city here. So this place here was strategically very important.
And you get to learn the history, over 1,000 years of history on this walk.
They were enemies of the Florentines. After a siege of 4 years, the Florentines destroyed this settlement here called Semifonte, and they made a law that nothing was ever to be built on the hilltop. Never, ever, ever again. Only in the 16th century they built this chapel that we are going to see.
And we walk.
And we walk. Because why did they build this tower? To have Florentine families live here, to check the hill that nothing was built. But what you see here, these layers are millions of years old. This is when we had the sea in this area. Over there, that arch that you see there, is an Etruscan tomb. So that will be 400 years before Christ. The Germans had a war hospital in the villa over here. And the Germans decided to cut down all the trees to stop the American tanks to pass by. And all the trees still have the damage done by the Germans in the war. They were not successful, otherwise we would all be speaking German here.
You get to learn the history, over 1,000 years of history on this walk as we go to the Duomo, which is an exact replica of the Duomo in Florence. So it's a copy of Brunelleschi's dome. It's a 1/8 scale model of the most famous and the largest brick dome in the world. And it's right there just in the middle of nowhere, which is so cool. And you've done a lot of paintings there.
Yeah, the cover of our first book, our Italian book, was painted from that spot.
That's right. We love that spot. It's right down the road. It's very picturesque, and a lot of times, depending on if it's fall and the leaves are down, you can look from Villa Il Santo and see the top of that dome. And it's kind of nice to be there. It kind of evokes Florence, and it's beautiful countryside there. And it's always a nice walk in the morning.
Been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
That was fun.
While y'all were walking, I'd gone ahead earlier, and we took a van up there and began the painting up there. And I had painted the dome before in Florence, so now I was able to paint the scale model of the dome in the countryside there. So
yeah, we were walking up the hill, slaving up the hill on our morning walk. Wyatt's painting.
it's tough. Well, I was working on the painting there, and you have to look up to see the dome, and you really kind of, I knew it was a model, but I didn't really realize how close it resembled that until I did the painting. I mean, if you were looking at the painting, you might think it was the dome in Florence.
Yeah. The local legend is, because a lot of people get married in that little chapel. It's very cool, it's very romantic. It's up on a very picturesque hill, surrounded by grapes and olives, and you've got this very historic, I mean, it's like 500 or 600 years old. I mean, we think about that. It's a replica of the dome in Florence, but it's older than this country is by far, that little building. But the local legend is that if you walk around the building 3 times, that you will be lucky in love, let's say.
Is that legally binding?
I don't know, but I walked around that building 3 times, I'll tell you that, man. So we had that beautiful walk up the hill, very historic, learned a lot about the history of that area. And the beauty of it is waiting for us was not only your beautiful artwork, but pastries from Bagnoli Pasticceria, and they are the best. And they're great in the bakery in the morning. They're even better as a picnic breakfast right under the model of the Duomo there.
I concur. Well, as you know, from your experience right now with Italy, There's a painting here, there's a painting here, there's a painting. Everywhere you look, a painting. Here, there, a painting. Everywhere, a painting. So there's no problem painting here. When I was here the first time we were working on the book, I did 128 paintings. This was the view. We all three decided that's what needs to be the cover, because it's got the serpentine road, the patchwork quilted landscape. These landscapes, to me, it looks like somebody said, okay, artistically, not really concerning at all about what they're growing there. I think it would look good to have olives there. I think that would be really good for grapes. Oh, let's put some cypresses here. They're so artistic in the way that they're arranged, even though I know they just happened. But the way, from a painter's point of view, this is all a very, very paintable place. A lot of what I decide is the walking. I take looks, and I really paint faster. I mean, if you're going to put a painting on the cover of a book that's called an Italian Palate, you don't want them to scratch their head and say, I wonder where that is. When you think of Italy, food, painting, art, architecture, which is included in the paintings, wine, which I certainly enjoyed along the way, the things that I like are all very Italian. I like the fact that people rode bicycles here, and I'm just going to let it happen. I'm not going to say what Italy is. I'm going to see if I can discover what Italy is, because so much of painting to me is not really saying what I know, but trying to say what I'm discovering. And I love watercolor. I had painting my entire life, but the first time that I saw a watercolor, I fell in love with it. I thought, wow, Sargent really is a great painter. Look at these great paintings. And then I get over here and I think, yeah, he was a great painter, but these are great things to paint. It didn't occur to me as much that there was so much impact that the subjects and the life here had on the paintings. I thought he was just doing a great job of a pretty good subject, when actually he was doing a great job of a great subject. So I hope you're enjoying the experience. These are my thoughts on painting in Italy.
We were in Venice, and we were just about to leave Venice, and that's towards the end of the trip. So he had probably finished 120, 115 watercolors. He's carrying them around, and then he goes to step in the canal off onto a boat and slips and almost goes into the canal with every painting he had just finished. He was hugging it like a little baby.
And I did it like the guy in the movies jumps on a hand grenade to save his platoon. You know what I mean? I thought, gotta get these paintings. They're watercolor. Water and watercolor do not mix.
The cool thing about that area is you can drive literally about 2 miles from our villa or any point and come across a little small family farm. And Casanova is one of those places. They make great cheese. It's the pecorino that's made at Casanova is some of my favorite, period. They've got a lot of sheep there. They milk the sheep twice a day. And there's just a small facility. You drive by it 9 times out of 10. Locals in the area, when I've steered them to go there, they don't even know it's there, and it's 2 or 3 miles from where they are. Sometimes it's not maybe the most decorated place or the most pretty place, but it's the most real place. It's run by an Italian family that looks straight out of Central Casting for an Italian cheese-making family. They're great. They work hard. They're up twice a day, milking the sheep.
Working, yeah.
There are dogs on the property. If you have sheep, you got to have sheep dogs, and they have Great Pyrenees there, which I've owned a couple of Great Pyrenees. They're great dogs. I was talking to Marco, the owner there. He was showing me that the Great Pyrenees there, Rocco, had puppies. And I said, oh, I'm well aware of that because I was there at the conception. Last time we were here, making little Roccos right here.
Oh my.
The process was going on before the puppy came here. Oh yeah, and Christina, his wife, was actually pregnant on our first visit and had the baby by the time we got to the second visit.
A very fertile area.
Babies everywhere.
And you never know what you're going to find on these trips.
watercolor bottles.
Most people throw the bottles away, but I needed them to paint with, to put water in to carry so I could make watercolors.
Wyatt's always in search of plastic water bottles. Most people are throwing those things away. Wyatt, all day long, hey, save your bottle, save your bottle, save your bottle. So you never know what treasures you're going to find over there in the Italian countryside.
Recycle. Another thing we found was a Lamborghini on the farm.
Yeah, but it was a tractor.
It was a Lamborghini tractor.
That's true. The great thing about Tuscany is you can drive a few miles down the road and come to a place with world-class cheese, world-class meats. And so, you know, we always stop there and they put on a little tasting and you taste the different cheeses and the aged cheeses and the different varieties of cheeses. They have some with truffle in it. The Pecorino cheese is awesome. And we always try to smuggle just a little bit in our luggage back to the States. So customs disregard that last statement.
Cheese mule. And at the tasting, there was a Ferrari.
It was a model Ferrari, but a Ferrari, I guess. We're going to get him an Italian sports car before this thing's over.
Okay.
So really, from our villa, you can walk 100 yards down the road and there's something for you to paint. I typically kind of drive around and you look and observe as artists do, and more times than not, somewhere along the way, you'll say stop. And you see that thing that you want to paint, and most of the times it's something I've either passed 20 times and never see what you see, but you always end up with this beautiful painting out of that. So as you usually do, you said stop, and you saw the thing you wanted to paint. We got out, got you set up.
Why did the Wyatt cross the road? To get to the chickens on the other side.
You know, I took off in Palate and get some pasta.
Good. And I start painting out there, and I'm out there by my lonesome out there in the middle of the Italian countryside. And suddenly this fella comes up, and I kind of get the idea this is his property, but he doesn't speak English and I don't speak Italian.
Buonasera.
So we're kind of trying to go back and forth, and I'm a little bit of a loss there.
Ventura, Polo, see?
Here's the dirty little secret that we don't keep a secret, is that Wyatt and I don't speak Italian.
I speak like this, though.
Not even close, man. I'm gonna tell you, I speak a little menu Italian and I speak pleasantries. We do our best.
I was just glad to see you guys pull up because I was a little bit of a loss. I didn't really know what to do and I needed some backup, and y'all were there.
You were mid-painting and you couldn't really tell if the guy was upset that you're there painting his chickens or if he expected to get the painting at the end of the thing.
Or euros were involved.
Yeah.
You never know.
I wonder if the chickens ever cross the road. You just didn't know, but you kept going, and we tried to communicate a little ways, and I think a couple of people drove by over the course and they translated for us a little bit, and in the end I think the gentleman was just happy.
He was very accommodating. In fact, he moved the chickens around to better facilitate the painting.
Yeah.
So even though we didn't speak the language, there was that universal language of just wanting to get along and wanting to communicate.
There was a little dramatic tension there in a bit that we were afraid the chickens might get run over a little bit. He brought them out of the pen so you could paint them a little better, but I was thinking, oh man, these things we're gonna kill this guy's chickens, and it's gonna be, you're really gonna have to give him the painting if we killed his chickens. We appreciate you letting us paint your chickens here.
We were able to communicate that much. That was good.
There's a great ending to the chapter with the chickens because we came back to America with that painting.
This one's for you, Joe.
And visited our friend Joe Sanderson over there at Sanderson Farms, and you presented him with that painting. Giuseppe Franco, this is for you.
An Italian chicken.
That area of Tuscany is so historic that really anywhere you go, there is history there. There's a little chapel right above the villa that I've passed hundreds of times and had never been in there until this trip. And who knew there's a Templar stone in there from the Knights Templar that has been there since whenever the Knights Templar came through. I don't know what a Templar stone is, but
We can get on the phone and call Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Get that all straightened out.
or Dan Brown, somebody.
Another great part of this trip was we had your brother with you, your first patron.
Yeah. I've tried to get Drew, my brother, over to Italy many times, but most of the time we're traveling during duck season or deer season, and he won't leave the country for that. But we got him there in the spring. You know, he was the very first person I ever cooked for.
So I'm Robert's brother, Drew, and his cooking career started at a very young age. He asked Santa Claus one year for an easy bake oven. I think he was 5.
He gave me a lot of flack about that. Boys back then didn't really cook, but he always gave me flack with his mouth full with those cakes and pizzas that came out of that little blue oven that cooks with a 100-watt light bulb.
Really good time with the easy bake oven. That's really where it all started. He would cook it and I would eat it. And we had a great relationship early on in culinary arts.
Can you believe we let kids bake with toys back then?
Early on, I paid full price for the books, but now that he's become really famous and I guess obviously wealthy, I don't only get it at half price now. So it's been a big savings for us in our library.
Sound brotherly love. So Villa El Santo, where we stay, the place we fell in love with years ago when we first went over, it's just a beautiful place. And the Tuscan hillside in the distance, and there's not a tourist in sight. It's just us and the locals in the Tuscan countryside. The food they have there, Anna Gloria is a great cook, but she also has 2 friends, Nadia and Rosanna, who come in the villa a lot of times, and they'll cook dinner, and they put on a spread.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
I guess to be an Italian is to cook.
Yeah, and to eat.
And Enzo was pointing out these great Roman ruins that he thought would make a good painting. And I was walking around, I thought, well, this is pretty good, but you know, I wound up painting the kitchen in the monastery there, and it's just a great Italian kitchen, but it's not Roman ruins.
Right. You know, that's what I love about your eye, is that you see the things that we don't see, and you always make the right choice. I learned early on when we started working together, I was trying to kind of steer you, oh, you ought to paint this, you ought to paint this, and politely you would do that. They were never quite as successful as the ones where you chose the subject matter. It's your eye, and I learned that quick, and so now I just don't say anything, and whatever you choose is always the best thing, and that's, you know, what I learned is you let the artist be the artist, and that's always the best way to go.
And you know what I titled the painting?
What's that?
Kitchen Tetrazzini.
Oh, nice, nice. No matter where you are, you can stay within a 2-mile radius of the most remote place in the Tuscan countryside and see the most amazing things and taste the most amazing foods, see world-class architecture, walk through history, and just be in that space.
I agree with that.
You know, we've seen a good bit, but there's so much more to see.
I can't wait.
Nah, me either.
Many of the paintings seen on today's program, plus many others, are featured in the An Italian Palate cookbook. This beautiful volume also includes authentic Italian recipes. An Italian Palate cookbook. Palate to Palate with Robert St. John and Wyatt Waters is made possible by a generous contribution from Sanderson Farms. Additional funding is provided by this and other public television stations and from viewers like you. Thank you.